Lycra lunacy, that's how one critic describes Sydney City Council's enthusiastic embrace of cycleways. Of course, for years, commuters have yearned for a solution to the increasing pressure on roads and public transport. Some saw a ray of light last May with the opening of an ambitious cycleway plan that promises over 200 kilometres of cycleways around inner Sydney. Lord Mayor Clover Moore is determined to remove bikes from the road and onto dedicated cycleways. But there's opposition, including questions as to the safety of the plan and whether the legal rights of pedestrians are being traded away in the rush to transform Sydney. Greg Miskelly reports.
Despite the extreme cold, these cyclists in Pyrmont are experiencing a warm inner glow. The reason? Bright green bike routes keep appearing around town.
I only used it yesterday and the day before for the first time because the signs went up saying that I could use it and it was unblocked, and I think it's really great.
It was virtually unrideable years ago. The traffic was quite horrendous, a lot of trucks navigating driveways. One would take their life into their own hands trying to traverse Burke Road. Today, it's a corridor and it's accessible, I would say, to every cyclist.
Mark Sydenham has been a cyclist for 32 years. He's excited about Alexandria's Burke Road and its new two-way bike path.
Well, the appeal is going forward. It's really to encourage a whole new generation of cyclists to mobility, to interact in and around their community.
We have done extensive consultation. 80% of people asked us to provide a transport option. We have done extensive research, and we have modelled our network on specifically on Sydney conditions.
Sydney Mayor Clover Moore sees her council's cycle plan as the centrepiece of a state bike strategy.
But we really need transport options in Sydney. Too many people are stuck in their cars or stuck on overcrowded buses, and we really need to address that.
It's a 10-year project with a cost of $74 million that promises dedicated cycle paths into 165 suburbs. But this fluoro rebranding of Sydney's transport has struck marketing problems. In the narrow streets of Surrey Hills, new two-way bike paths and shared intersections aren't always welcome.
We feel that in order to create this space, Council has compromised the safety of all road users.
And we're going to keep fighting.
The Friends of Burke Street are a group of local residents who have opposed the City of Sydney's bike plan on a raft of issues. David and Rosemary Potts are now worried about community safety.
On Burke Street, there's over 23 intersections coming in at the sides, and this is where the conflict is going to come, where there's going to be pedestrians, there's going to be cars trying to turn left or right, and there's going to be the cycleway people as well.
Local Peter Whitehead is a cyclist who also rejects the plan.
Burke Street already is a very good place to ride. I've been riding up here for years. There's no problems. But to put an expensive bidirectional cycleway that's too narrow, they are less safe because they've got sort of driveways coming out. There's people who aren't used to looking both ways when they come out.
It's become apparent that Burke Street's an example of what not to do when you're building a cycle path. From what we can gather, it appears that the local residents weren't consulted. The residents are up in arms because they've lost parking opportunities. Local businesses are up in arms because of the impact it's had on their local businesses. Motorists are up in arms because it's created even more congestion on the road.
Peter Curry says the NRMA, while fully supporting cycling, has real concerns that poorly planned cycleways won't solve massive transport problems.
The people who use our roads are overwhelmingly using them in their motor vehicle. Around 80% of people use their car regularly, less than 2% will use their bicycle regularly, and when they do, the majority of those use it for recreational purposes. So it's not actually taking more cars off the road.
Clover Moore argues the dividends of the plan are huge and will pay off into the long term.
We can't just do business as usual. Business as usual means we have the highest rate of obesity in the OECD. We have a congestion rate that's costing us currently approximately $4 billion a year. We have overcrowded public transport. and our cycling option will address those issues.
It's a sentiment shared by Elena Gardner, the president of Bike Sydney, a cyclist support group. She's not concerned with any initial imperfections.
It's early days, and some of this is a little bit maybe experimental. It hasn't been done before, and so there's this opportunity to test things and see how they might work.
Elena Gardner thinks Sydney, like other global cities, should have a functioning cycle network and welcomes any focus on safety.
I think it's a debate the community needs to have, a big open public discussion about why we're doing this.
But it's not just road users talking. As head of St Vincent's Hospital Emergency Room, Dr Gordian Fulda is witnessing an increase in cycling-related injuries.
My biggest worry as a doctor in an emergency department is that you can break your arms, but what happens if you get a head injury? Bicycle helmets are good, but they're not for major impacts.
His safety concerns are not just for those riding bikes. Here on the Pyrmont Bridge, pedestrians and cyclists are being encouraged to get to work in a new 10 km per hour shared zone.
It happens a lot, but these people don't have number plates. You can't identify them. Often they cycle off.
Harold Scrooby from the Pedestrian Council supports active transport like cycling and walking. But he fears the price of moving bikes off roadways may be paid for by unprotected pedestrians in the shared zones.
If you look at Clover's cycle paths throughout the city, about 2/3 are coming up onto the footpath. No insurance, no risk assessment.
I know that currently it is illegal for cyclists to be on footpaths. We're looking very carefully at our road system. We would like to be able to create separated lanes for cyclists on all our roads. That is not possible.
Harold Scrooby says governments are ignoring existing law, where pedestrians have the right of way in shared zones.
The first thing that has to be done is by the RTA. They must mandate that the maximum speed on a shared path, that's a footpath, is 10 kilometres an hour.
While various education campaigns aimed at cyclists are happening, Harold Scrooby thinks it's inevitable injured pedestrians will end up suing councils.
Look, where we have to accept liability, we have to accept liability. I think we've got to get on and create as safe an environment as we can.
The court heard he struck 77-year-old James Gould, who was crossing Beach Road at Mentone. Mr Gould died from his injuries the next day.
In Melbourne, a pedestrian fatality during a bike race led to tough new dangerous riding laws for road cyclists. But in New South Wales, there are no new cycling laws planned.
If we need to introduce new laws into our parliaments, well, yes, of course, as a private member I could do that. I think it's really important that councils work with governments on this transport change, and if we need laws, well, yes, we'll have to introduce them.
And as the new cycle paths transform Sydney into a biking city, cyclists too welcome any means to make the roads safer.
At this stage, the infrastructure is at a point where there are some points in the infrastructure where the cyclist has very little choice other than to break the law. I think it's a good opportunity to examine a whole lot of options available to us in law reform.
While the debate over shared zones continues, the question as to how to best deliver on street safety remains.
We have a very compact city. We have a hilly city. And it is just nearly an impossible question to answer. How do we get these mixtures to go? But the reality is more and more people are cycling, more people using motorised two wheels as well, and we're seeing more and more people coming to